I will say here, a unseen advantage of being the commish and doing shit like this is I like become very, very familiar with everyone's roster, their strengths, their weaknesses. Like it definitely ends up helping out later on when planning like waiver pickups or draft proposals. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I've already looked at this crap a lot. Like I know who has good receivers and who has, weaker positions. So like, yeah, it's just fun to fuck around, do rankings, but also like it is legitimately helpful. So nobody else should ever do it.
As told by your numerous championships that you won.
Look, I said it was helpful. I didn't say it could overcome complete, incompetence.
Ooh, man. All right. That's T minus 30 seconds till Callan got all defensive about his championship.
Oh, I was already. That's not T minus. I've been T minus since birth, bro. It's never turned off. And another thing, Scotty ain't won no championships.
Hey, but we saw on that graph that I put together that I was the best. So I'm really holding on to that right now,
Yeah. All right. I already got recording going. I'll cut out whatever. I don't want to make this too long. I figured no one's going to be able to it's hard to keep any people focused for like 15 minutes. So I figure if we go like 2 minutes a person here, we'll get a first.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So I guess I'll cut to here then, or maybe we'll have a cold intro, but as if we weren't already like white dudes in our 30s enough, smoking meats and playing fantasy football. Now we have a podcast about a fantasy football league. So, or at least we can say more here than we can with our typing. So what I want to do, my vision for this hopefully is that every week we kind of try to do a rotation. I know some people are going to like not want to do it at all, and that's cool. But I figured it'd be like a cool check-in throughout the season, make everybody put in a little bit of effort. Since, originally we wanted to like rotate power rankings anyway, and it's just so hard to get people. But I figure if we can get like a decent rotation, so peer pressure if anybody's listening to this tomorrow morning for the first 30 seconds before you turn it off. Okay, with that being said though, power rankings. So Scotty had some. I had mine yesterday. I spent like 2 hours on this, which is way more than I should have. But we'll just go through each team. Do we want to do it, Scotty? You sent me your rankings, or I could read off my rankings. I figure we go last to first, and then we just like bullshit about each team for like 90 seconds and share like a general vibe of the team.
Yeah, we can use yours as like kind of the guide, like we'll go in order, and then I can talk about like where I have them ranked, and then K-Man, it sounds like did no preparation for this, just like the draft. So, just jump in wherever.
I just like to go off the dome. So yeah, you guys go ahead, and I'll just be the peanut gallery here.
The color commentary.
Yeah.
The vibes guy.
Exactly. I mean, my draft is based entirely on vibes, so yeah, that's pretty fitting.
All right, so Callan, who did you have? Let's do last to first to make it nice and interesting. Who did you have at 12? You're on mute if you're talking.
We should just keep that pause in the unedited, in the edited version.
Or he's just not able to hear us at all. This is going swimmingly.
Can you not hear me now? Hello?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry for, version problems here. I think the wire on my mic is loose. Anyway, my last place, sorry to say, K-Man, is Mr. Kanowski.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Interesting.
So here's my 3 or 4 point rationale for this. 1, first round pick, Puka. I think he's going to be good, but I think one, it's just hard to replicate what he did, right? He doesn't have like the breed of it. Like he was kind of out of nowhere. So it's like, was it a fluke or not? I think he is still going to be very good. I think he's going to struggle more with Cooper Kupp coming back though. So it's like, is he going to deliver first round value? Rachaad White, I think is going to be okay as an RB1. I think he relied a lot. I looked up the only running backs who had more receiving yards than him last year were Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey. Like, that's the level he has to play to even replicate what he did last year. And, like, could he do it? Sure. Is he going to? I don't know. Josh Allen is going to be good. He's finished, I was looking at this, he's finished wide receiver 1 like 3 of the last 4 years or something. Like, he's going to finish QB1. Did I say wide receiver? He's going to finish QB1, but he has to, like, play at that level because essentially from Jaylen Warren down, I'm, like, not sold on the rest of the roster. I feel like there's a little bit of upside with, like, a Pearsall maybe, but, like, none of these guys are even starters at their positions. Jaylen Warren, Javonte Williams maybe, if the Saints offense is even good. Kyle Pitts has upside, but, like, he hasn't done it yet, right? But it's, like, not there, right? I have no confidence, I guess. Or like, it could happen, but we haven't seen it yet. So he's my number 12.
So I'm going to hit you with the first actually, and I'll just allow you to imagine me pushing my glasses up my nose. So when you said Javonte Williams, I think you thought Jamal Williams for the Saints, but put some respect on Javonte Williams,
I was going to
the current nominal starter for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, dude, he was so great last year. As a flex running
back. About to rattle off his, like, 6 points a game stats and kind of shit on you that, you know, this guy is expected to be a significant contributor in your doo-doo ass running back room.
Like, even your RB2. Who is the RB2 on this roster? Like, okay, so Rashad's going to be fine, RB1. Who is RB2? Like, Javonte, I guess.
I prefer to think of this as a running back by committee, Callan. It's a modern offense, thank you.
Yeah. I don't think this team is like, none of the teams this year I felt like are like, oh, you're out of it from the beginning. I think we have, like, every year we get, like, a little bit better. Like, there's more and more parity every year. So this isn't like a vintage Tron 2016 draft or anything. But, you know, someone has to be 12. Scotty, where did you have K-Man in your, do we want to just reflect it that way?
Yeah.
Where did you have
him?
We'll
do it that way. I had K-Man at 9. I was a little bit more gracious. I want to believe the Kyle Pitts hype at some point, that he's actually going to not even live up to the hype, but just be a decent tight end, you know, like a high-end tight end and go from there. The running backs just really, even Rashad White, I'm not a fan of. Josh Allen, I think, you know, even losing Stephon Diggs, like, his value really is in the rushing. So I think he's going to be perfectly fine there. Yeah. And K-Man's trying to play it off like, you know, he didn't prep for this, yet he has, like, the darling from every fantasy football podcast of Ricky Pearsall being like, oh, that's going to be a sneaky good pick. It's like, come on, bro. We know you're trying way too hard listening to those. Still upset that you have Zach Charbonnet because I got Ken Walker. But, yeah, I mean, just overall, there's nothing other than Josh Allen and Puka. There's really nobody on this roster that gets me excited. You know, Godwin may have gotten me excited a few years ago, but I honestly forgot that guy was even still around because he's just been kind of a non-factor for a minute.
Yeah, his numbers will back that up too. He'll be lucky to finish as a wide receiver too, probably again this year. Yeah, like, Allen and Puka are going to be good, but this is a team where I feel like if those two guys don't play at, like, Pro Bowl level, the rest of the roster is not enough to pull them back up. Unless Kyle Pitts turns into, like, I think we all want to see him be good, but he hasn't yet, basically. All right. Keep this.
The craziest part about this roster, though, is just that K-Man legitimately could have gone from, like, you know, last place to first place if he had just set his keepers. Is probably the most mind-blowing part here, honestly.
Yeah, all-time keeper fumble, I think.
You know what? I deserve that.
All right. Next, I had Crams. So my notes on him were, number 1, Drake London, first-round pick. That's wild. Okay. I mean, maybe, but what? The rest of his wide receivers are, like, actually pretty decent. I think Keenan Allen as a 7th rounder is actually one of the best steals of the draft, to be honest. When this dude's healthy, he's, like, almost a top 10 lock, and I don't think that's going to go away if he can stay healthy. And I mean, you can see his history here. I think this was in the 7th round. That's a freaking steal. And I think Waddle's going to be fine. I think Rashee Rice is going to be fine, although I just saw KC sign Juju this morning. Laporta is going to be fine. Really, the reason Krams is down here is Tua is going to be like, might get dropped. He's going to be like a streaming quarterback probably. Even last year, whenever Tyreek went off, he was like barely top 10 at the quarterback, which is, not even an average quarterback. And then his running backs are frankly just like, who cares? Pacheco's going to be like decent, of course. But like, yeah, Najee Harris, whatever. Zach Moss, whatever. These three guys are like maybe bye-week fills. Just again, like nothing to really make me think like this team. There's nobody on this team that I think even has the potential to go off and carry this team to into the playoffs. So he gets my 11 spot.
So yeah, oddly enough, I had him 11, like also like right on the nose there. I definitely felt the same way. Where it's funny when you start to draft with people for 10 years. You can almost like blindly identify, who they are. Like, I'll talk about it when we get to Mark's, that like, there's like a very Mark-esque draft where he, puts a bunch of like convicted felons on his roster. And Cramsey's is always just like, if you put it like through this, like a random number generator type thing, just like some straight nonsense for the first rounds, and then it gets a little bit better. I don't know why Chris seems to be opposed to drafting a running back at a reasonable time. It just blows me away. I think Drake London in the first was a little bit surprising. I don't know that I'm like on this like Sam Laporta hype. Definitely not for a second round pick. Jalen Waddle has some potential, but that's still like a wide receiver too behind Tyreek. He's heavily invested in the Chiefs offense, except for the actual guys on the Chiefs that take up a lot of the cap space. So you're just like, oh yeah, like that vaunted Chiefs offense. Like, let's get the, relatively no-name running back out of like, where was he from? Illinois or wherever. Rashee Rice, that's fine, I guess. That's like a decent keeper. I do like the Keenan Allen pick. But yeah, the rest of it does not inspire really, really much confidence whatsoever, especially at the quarterback there. I'm definitely a Tua hater in terms of his ability to throw the deep ball, and he's really just relying heavily on Tyreek at this point. So as much as I love Chris as a person, it was very easy to put him as 11th.
Yeah.
So just one comment about this. I love how Callan casually threw in the Juju Smith-Schuster signing as if it was like actual news that was relevant to fantasy. I just thought that was funny.
I mean, it will be relevant in other places, but like, yeah, it's not a huge thing, but I'm just making commentary, and I just realized I was recording the wrong
screen. It's relevant because he follows him on TikTok or something for the silly dances,
TikTok, that's right. Yeah. I mean, what more can we say? I think we hit on Chris.
We love you, Chris.
Love you, Chris. All right, my next one. So I guess this is why I had Chiefs on the brain. I had John Yarrow here at number 10. So the notes I had here was, again, first round pick is wild. I understand you're picking, 12 in a keeper league, which really you're keeping, number 16 or whatever. So that's rough, but my opinion, my zero championship opinion is that your first round pick should be like your safest possible pick, right? Like, yes, upside, but like I want guaranteed upside. I don't want to have to be like guessing about the upside. And this, it's a rookie wide receiver. Like, it's just, that's tough. Honestly, when I looked at his roster next, I was like, man, there's really nothing like that jumps out to me here. Like, there's a few good guys, he's not last in the power rankings, but it wasn't anybody that I was like, this is a championship roster. ETN, honestly, I've never been super high on the dude. He had a really good year last year, but like even at Clemson, I was like not super high on him. He's proven me wrong. Cooper Kupp, he actually played well last year whenever he came back, although he obviously was hurt a lot. One that surprised me was Patty Mahomes. I didn't realize he was only wide receiver 8 last year. I think he lost a lot of value with Tyreek leaving, obviously. I remember seeing a stat like towards the end of the season that his depth of target, so here's a K-Man stat, average depth of target was like outside of the top 10 for quarterbacks. Like, he wasn't taking a lot of deep shots last year, and he doesn't run a ton, and I think that showed through. He only was QB 8, yet here he is getting taken, at the very beginning of round 4. He's obvious, like, he is a better NFL quarterback than fantasy quarterback to me at this point. Like obviously the GOAT, for now anyway, but fantasy wise, whatever. So I was just like kind of lukewarm. The more I look down though, I think there are some points that stick out to me. Singletary was not bad for the Texans last year, believe it or not. He was like a flex play, and he is a starting running back, which, I mean, that's something. Jerome Ford, he was good last year, and he will be good this year. It was also, I saw today, Nick Chubb is going to start the year on the PUP, of course. Oh, yeah. No surprise. But Ford was great whenever he was a starter last year, and he got him down here in like the 10th round. Like, as long as Chubb is out, if he even comes back this year, like John could have legitimately gotten a starter for the entire season in the 10th round. Like that's great. Josh Palmer, again, I don't think he's like incredible. He's wide receiver 1 probably for Justin Herbert, unless you're a McConkey truther. But he's probably the most talented receiver on this roster. Someone's got to get targets for Justin Herbert. So there's like a few dudes down here where I'm like, I think McBride's going to be good. Pickens, again, he's like, they got to throw it to somebody in Pittsburgh. I think this is like, there are highlights here, but not great, I guess. But, it's something. We'll see if John can like make some key waiver pickups. Where'd you have John?
I had him at 8. I don't think there was anything egregious about his roster. It just didn't inspire a ton of confidence. I am, like you, have a lot of the same complaints about ETN. I mean, Devin Singletary is fine. I think Maserati Marv could be pretty legit. I think that, shout outs to Gus Johnson. Cooper Kupp, if he stays healthy, is obviously great. Definitely some homer picks, though. Patrick Mahomes is like definitely at this point a much better NFL quarterback than fantasy quarterback. The Chiefs' offense was not great last year. His ADOT definitely suffered without a deep threat. I mean, maybe John is right that Xavier Worthy is really going to take the top off the defense and, allow them to really open things up over the middle, wherever else, and, to be able to take those deep shots. But I still think he was kind of not a great draft pick there, but I can also respect the homer picks. I think you hit on a lot with the Browns running back situation. I'm not convinced that they're going to throw the ball for the Chargers at all. I think Jim Harbaugh is probably going to ruin Justin Herbert's career with his trying to rebuild the 2024 Michigan offense in Los Angeles, or 2023 Michigan offense in Los Angeles. But yeah, that could be a sneaky good pick there. Yeah, like I said, not a terrible roster overall, but nothing that really like gets me super jazzed either.
Yeah. I think he's trying to rebuild the 2023 Michigan offense as the 2022 Baltimore offense with Gus Bus and Dobbins. Yeah, in San Diego. I think he's going to, maybe it'll work, but I'm not convinced either. All right. Next up, I guess this would be number 9. I had Logan. So, what notes did I have on Logan? I said a stupidly high-risk team, which, to be fair, if you want to win championships, you got to take risk. I'm proof that like going too conservative isn't gonna win you anything. But I think a lot of these were very high risk and very like, I don't know. I'm not convinced they're gonna pay off. So just to like call out a few here that I had jotted down. Jonathan Taylor, obviously been hurt a lot. He could be that guy still. I think he's better than, in the mid 30s, but I don't know if he's still a top 5 or 6 running back. There really wasn't a better option. I can't even really shit on him as a first round pick. I think D. Henney's going to be good. I don't know when he's going to not be good. It seems like every year he's just like a machine at this point. But I think these next two are where things went off the rails for me a little bit. Malik Neighbors as a wide receiver 1 who has never played in the NFL and has Daniel Jones throwing to him as your wide receiver 1 is kind of wild. Pittman, I think, is your wide receiver 2. I think he's very talented, but I think if he is going to legitimately have Anthony Richardson throwing the ball to him, and I do like the stack of also taking Richardson. I went and looked it up. Anthony Richardson has never completed 60% of his passes in a season in college or in the NFL. Like, he is going to be, this is a high spot on Logan's team. He is going to run, but I don't know if he's going to throw Pittman for, 900 yards and 6 touchdowns or whatever your wide receiver 2 realistically needs to get for you. That's if, also, again, risky, is Anthony Richardson going to stay healthy, right? He was an animal in like the 4 games he played last year. Like crazy good numbers until he got hurt twice. Can he do that? Can he get multiple rushing touchdowns a game? Like, that's risky. I think Zamir White is the worst starting running back in the NFL on a not very good offense. I think this is rough. And he's like one of your top flexes. Some decent-ish, Kmet as a backup tight end. Hopkins is going to be good. Reed is going to catch some balls. Like, these are going to be good flex plays. Jamison Williams, we're still waiting on him to break out. Like, he was a huge prospect, and he hasn't done anything on a good offense in Detroit. Like, it could hit, right? These top picks could hit, and I could just be wrong. But tons of, like, way more risk than upside to me in these top few rounds, which is really what you need to hit to be playoff competitive. So Logan pulls in at the number 9 spot.
I have Logan around 7 at 7. Double checking 7 here. I think he's got some high ceiling players for sure. I do think that Derrick Henry is, even though he's getting older, like, I trust him a lot in that Baltimore offense. I think that I have a soft spot for Jonathan Taylor. Any of my guys that have been number 1 running backs for me, I'll continue to believe in. I want to believe that he's going to bounce back, even though it's obviously been pretty quiet due to injury and contract dispute, all that fun stuff. I do not understand the Anthony Richardson. I don't understand it at all whatsoever. This is, like, to me, like exactly when Callan drafted Jerick McKinnon based on his Spark score, and Jerick McKinnon's non-factor, right? You look at, like, his explosive games. I just pulled this up while you were talking. His value is entirely predicated on getting some rushing touchdowns, which he did in 3 of the 4 games that he had. If you look at everything else as a passer, like in this, dominating 30-point game, he threw 11 completions on 25 attempts. You know what I mean? This dude, I don't understand Anthony Richardson hype at all.
So
it just does not make sense to me. It did not make sense coming out of Florida. It does not make sense coming right now. I just don't get it.
I think he's the anti-Mahomes. He's going to be a better fantasy than a real quarterback. And just like Jerick McKinnon, if he can stay healthy, that Spark score is going to carry him. But yeah, it's all rushing. If he doesn't rush, he's less than useless. Yeah.
For sure. And when I think of those quarterbacks that are definitely better in fantasy than they are IRL, I think of, like, Blake Bortles circa, like, 2015 or whatever, where it's like he was still throwing tutties in garbage time and stuff like that. I don't think of a quarterback that has never been a good passer. Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. Like, are you telling me he's going to be the Tyrone Swoops 18-wheeler package quarterback, dude, and that's going to be his fantasy value? Like, no, get the fuck out of here.
It's good enough to win and beat Notre Dame. It's good enough to win a fantasy championship,
Yeah, so I mean, I think Logan has some good players, but I just don't understand Anthony Richardson, and who knows, maybe he'll go off, be QB1, and I'll sound like an idiot in a few months.
So I was going to say the toughest thing about this roster is something that Callan mentioned in passing, which was the fact that there is a backup tight end on this roster, until I noticed that Callan also has a backup tight end, and so it made more sense why it was just kind of glossed over.
I do not have a backup tight end, so this is Andrew Carter. I do have a backup. I have Schultz. My response to that, yeah, I have Schultz. You're right. My response is the last 3 rounds of the draft are literally inconsequential, and to me, like, you can try to pick up a sleeper or whatever, but, like, I don't, that's probably dumb because there are some, like, sleepers that come out of the end, but it feels like an absolute crapshoot. Like, these rounds matter almost nothing to me for really anybody.
Like, if you've got a roster spot for a backup tight end, you have a roster spot for a kicker, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, equally useless, right? Equally useless. You're breaking up a little bit there, Cam.
True. All right, guys, I got to drop, but I'm sure that you guys will hold it down for the rest of the draft. Can't wait to hear the rest of the analysis.
Take it easy, bud.
For sure.
Yeah.
Later. All right. So you had Logan ranked higher than me then, because I had him at 9 and you had him at 7. So you must have liked something a little bit more than me.
Oh, I mean, if you look at it, there's 2 running backs that I love on this roster.
I've always been
a Derrick Hennessy truther. I had Jonathan Taylor during his number 1 season. So looking at that, I was immediately like, all right, it's got a pretty high floor. I also personally know that I may overvalue the running back position quite a bit. And even if he is like arguably the worst starter, having 3 starting running backs, especially 2 of those being Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. Is a really, really strong running back core, in my opinion.
That's true. I can buy that. Okay. My next up was, who was it here? It was Carlo. Okay. So he is my number 8. These are from here on out are like, I think these are all very legitimate playoff contenders. Like this is in my mind anyway, where that tier hit. So Carlos, the note I had on him was good roster. You know, you have to pick apart something. First, I said all of his talent is in the top half of his draft, which it is for everybody. But I look down here, there's very little that I care about in kind of the whole bottom, you know, from 8 down. He traded me a 7th round pick and he had 2 5ths. But all these players I don't think are really going to be relevant. Brandon Cooks is maybe has the best shot. But yeah, even in Dallas, I don't know. We'll see how much love he gets compared to some of their other options. But otherwise, I really don't none of these dudes are going to win the league for him. So really the top half of his draft has to hit in my mind, which could absolutely happen. But I do have questions about most or all of these guys. Saquon's going to be great. No questions there. Kittle, I think, is going to be great. No questions there. But the rest of these dudes, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, they're already on the decline. They were not good last year. I don't see how their situation change is going to make them suddenly better. T. Higgins is your wide receiver 2. He hasn't finished, he's going to be lucky to finish as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, barely scratching his value that he needs. He's just fine. Diggs is going to be good. My question with Diggs is not a talent question. I think he is still the same player. This is my Texan homer coming out. The Texans are so loaded with talent this year on this offense. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, John Mechie was catching touchdowns in the preseason. Dalton Schultz is still there. Joe Mixon catches passes out of the backfield. Is there going to be enough? He's going to do really well with the targets he gets. I would be shocked if he's going to hit 160 targets again like he did in Buffalo. These numbers are outrageous. And I just don't think C.J. Stroud is going... I mean, I hope to God C.J. throws 50 touchdowns and all of them go to Diggs, right? I'm not shitting on Diggs or his talent. I'm just saying, as a wide receiver 1 to be taken this high, I don't know if he's going to get enough of the volume from the team to fully deliver all that value. But, I mean, it could absolutely happen. And I think Lamar will be great too. So as long as these the top half of this team hits... I really think this could be the 8th best team or the 4th best team. I had to stick him somewhere. So he comes in 8th for me.
Yeah, I had him a lot higher. I had him at 4 just because I feel like his top half is extremely strong. Like you said, the only concern I have with Lamar is with the introduction of Derrick Henry. Somebody is going to vulture those goal line touchdowns, right? Is Lamar going to keep getting those, or is it going to be Derrick Henry? I personally think Derrick Henry will start eating more of that, right? It makes a lot more sense for a running back to take a lot of those hits than your franchise quarterback that you just paid a ton of money.
Yeah.
So I do think that will decrease his value a little bit, but Lamar Jackson I'm still very high on as a QB. I have a feeling, and I can't necessarily explain why, other than just saying it's not as incompetent as the Giants. But I think Saquon Barkley is going to do well, in the Philadelphia offense. That's proven to be pretty high powered. Right, he's a great player. I think they'll find ways to get him going there. Josh Jacobs, still a quality running back, doesn't get me super excited. I mean, he's a startable running back, right? Like if you have to start him, it's not
technically
not the end of the world. Yeah. It's not like a technical running back or starting running back like Zamir White. It's a little bit higher than that, in my opinion. But I do think with the Stephon Diggs situation, Joe Mixon, to me in the NFL, has like never really been like a feature back, like not like a special back, right? He just gets the volume. He's very consistent, but he's never really struck me as like that you're building around Joe Mixon, right? It feels like the run game is just there to kind of mix it up. When like he was on the Bengals and stuff, it's like I feel like it's going to be the same for the Texans. There are going to be a lot of mouths to feed. I do think they're going to throw it a lot with C.J. Stroud. Tank Dell is a pretty small guy. Obviously, he missed a significant portion of the season last year. I think with some injury, that could definitely open up some more volume for Stephon Diggs. But I think overall that offense is going to be really, really built around C.J. Stroud. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for everybody in that offense to really eat. With T. Higgins, like obviously that's you're playing second fiddle behind like Jamar Chase there, but you still have Joe Burrow throwing to you. That's pretty great. And then Brittle Kittle, he's been my guy for a while, so no notes there. I think after that, though, it really does start to drop off. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm putting him at number 4, but any injury to anybody on that top half could really, really shift the balance and knock him out of the playoff picture.
Yeah, I had the same note. 1 or 2 key injuries to these top guys, it's going to be rough. And I do fully agree with the Lamar Jackson take. It's kind of the same thing with Barkley, too. It's kind of, they wouldn't bring in Derrick Henry if they wanted Lamar taking goal line runs. But Barkley, he's kind of suffering from the same thing, is that Jalen Hurts, like you can go back and look at Swift's carries from last year, and he lost a bunch of touchdowns because of Jalen Hurts stealing goal line carries from a running back. So like, I just thought of that while you were saying it. Does that hurt Saquon a little bit that, I don't know his red zone touches from, his past years, but Jalen Hurts runs those goal line carries. It is going to be interesting to see if the Eagles can keep pulling off the tush push with Jason Kelce retiring. But I think they're going to try. It's just too effective for them to just be like, oh, well, let's give it up. Like they still have Jalen Hurts. That dude can probably still squat 600 pounds. Like they're going to be all right.
But with both him and Lamar, they both got big contracts, right? Like Jalen Hurts finally got paid, if I remember correctly. So it's just like a simple question of, would you rather put the wear and tear on an aging running back that is not going to be in the league too much longer, and you're just trying to get out what you can out of them, or do you want it on your franchise quarterback? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's an easier question or an easier assumption to say that those rushing touchdowns, I think, will decrease for Lamar and Jalen Hurts just because of who they brought in.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Next up, so that was number 8. Number 7, I had Mr. Trondheim. Quick notes on him. I'll try to go a little quicker here. C-Mac automatically keeps you like in the top 7. Like he's just that good. Where even if the rest of your roster is doo-doo, he's going to keep you. Like it's just like a free 20, 25 points every week from a non-quarterback. It's just like it is what it is. Running backs are actually pretty solid. I like these. I think James Cook is going to be great again. I think Swift is still going to be useful, although he's not going to even get as much play as he got last year. He was like a decent RB2. I don't know if he's even going to hit that between, we'll just see how this offense plays. And I still think, Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are going to get carries. So we'll see how. I think this is going to turn into more of a running back by committee than Trond would like, but he's still going to be fine. The receivers, I think Dak is still going to be good, and I think Brock Bowers is a very high risk, like rookie tight end, high risk. The thing that really brought Tron down for me was these wide receivers. I don't think Zay Flowers is even going to be a wide receiver 2 again. And I was looking at Ayuk because I remember him being pretty good, but he only finished the last 2 years. So last year was his best finish of his career, wide receiver 14. He needed Brock Purdy to be performing at a literal MVP level, right? An MVP level Brock Purdy got him to wide receiver 14. If Brock Purdy takes even like a 10 or 15% step back in efficiency, which is just like, normal regression, unless you think Brock Purdy is like a perennial MVP candidate, then that takes him really from a, fringe RB or wide receiver 1 to like hopefully a wide receiver 2. And he's your second round pick. He's your wide receiver 1 on your team. And he's going to be like, I'm thinking he's going to be lucky to be in the top 20 this year as a wide receiver. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just looking at numbers here. I think Watson's actually going to be pretty decent. I think the Packers receivers, I think Jordan Love proved enough last year to me that those are going to be good guys this year. But yeah, just C-Mac's going to be great. Dak is going to be solid running backs. But these receivers and the tight end just like are dragging this roster down to me. So he gets my number, was it number 7 is what I said? Yeah.
So it pains me to say this, but I actually have Trond at number 3. And
Ouch.
I will say that that's purely just based on this draft. I think he'll find a way to run this team into the ground. Undoubtedly. So the main things is that Dak Prescott, like to me, was really high on my list. Just you look at the numbers, and he's just always been in like that top 10 quarterback. Like he finished number 3 last year, and it's just he is like a legitimately good fantasy quarterback.
Yeah.
Just gets like a ton of value. So I liked that pick there. Christian McCaffrey obviously is C-Mac. There's nothing else that needs to be said. I agree with everything you said, except that I'm very, very high on Brandon Ayuk and Zay Flowers. Okay. I think that Ayuk works really, really well in that 49ers offense. I know that like all the Chargers fans were super pissed that they took fucking Quentin Johnson instead of Zay Flowers, because like Zay Flowers had a pretty solid year last year. Showed a lot of like really great flashes. I'm just very high on both of those wide receivers. And I think that's really the kind of crux of why you have them at 7 and I have them at 3, is that I just think it's a pretty complete team. If you believe in both of those guys, like I do, I think then you look at it and say it's a pretty complete team there.
Yeah, I could buy that. Does it worry you at all that Ayuk still might get traded? Like, would they not use him as much, or do you think they're going to use him more? Like, because I don't think he still has a contract yet, which is what he was holding out for, and they were talking about like trading him. I don't know. That's
there's certain guys that I look at and I'm like, oh yeah, that they only really make sense on a specific team. And Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are both guys that I really like on the 49ers, that I think that, Shanahan does really, really interesting things with in the offense and gets them a lot of volume. That being said, either of those guys on any other team, I'm like, I don't think they're going to get the same value. So I do agree entirely that it is predicated on Ayuk staying on the 49ers.
I think he will too. I think NFL trades are so much more rumor than ever actually happening, especially those big blockbuster ones that like the 49ers want to keep him. They know how valuable he is. I think it's a bunch of like just posturing usually. So I think he's going to safely be on that team and get his numbers and stuff. But yeah, we'll see. Okay. Next up I had Carl. Big old doinks. His was hard to evaluate. So he ends up like in the middle of, was he number 6? So he's like right in the middle, just because he insisted on drafting so many goddamn rookies and like really, I don't know, I guess riskier type players to me. So I said he does have the best, absolute best 1-2 receivers in the league, Lamb and Chase. Like that's going to be elite. Travis Kelce is still going to finish, top 3 or whatever. And I do think James Conner is one of the most perpetually underrated running backs in fantasy. His numbers aren't even like gaudy looking back at past seasons, I guess. But I think he is a little bit injury prone. But the thing with fantasy sometimes is that you have to remember is like you win week to week. Like, yes, you want a guy who's good every week all season, but like I'd rather have a number 1 running back for half the year than a number a number 3 running back, like an RB3 for the entire season. Like I'm going to win more games with a guy who's winning me weeks. And I haven't run the numbers on this, but I just feel like when James Conner is healthy, he's is one of those types of players. But after that, it's like, so these guys are keeping him, number 6, I think. Is that what I said? What number am I on? 12, 11,
should
10,
be 6,
9,
I think,
8, 7. Yeah, number 6. So he's in the top half, just because these guys are going to be so good. And it's not that I think the rest of this roster is, it's a bunch of solid dudes, but I guess my thinking was just uncertainty, all these rookies. I don't think Jonathan Brooks he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be the guy that elevates Carolina's offense. And he's a rookie. We just don't know. I think Rome is going to be good, but again, he's really competing for targets on a team with a new quarterback. How do you even know what to expect? Rookie McConkey, rookie Corum. I like Rashid Shaheed. He's he was a good sleeper. And then the quarterback is, again, just a huge question mark to me. I don't know if Jane Daniels is going to be good, but again, it's hard to be an elite fantasy team without a consistent quarterback. And it's just I don't know if he's going to be good. So Carl has solid start, a lot of dudes with upside, but just I couldn't put a team with this many question marks, in my top 5. So he's sitting here at 6 for me.
Yeah, I was a lot lower on Corral's team. I have him at 10, and I think it's pretty easy to do when he's got 7 rookies on here. Yeah. You're essentially predicating success on the idea that you're just going to perfectly hit a bunch of rookies. And I just don't think that's a recipe for success in any way whatsoever. And really the only thing keeping him from being 11 or 12 is that, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and Travis Kelce. Even with that, though, I think that, CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, they're still young, still producing. Travis Kelce, it's what is he? He's 34. Yeah. He's gonna hit a wall at some point, right?
At some point.
At some point, and maybe it's not this year, but it's already a risky play. It's getting riskier every year, and then mixing it in with a bunch of rookies and James Conner, who is 30. So I mean, again, I know that James Conner that Carl has a lot of love for him. But really outside of those top 3 players, there's not anything that gets me super excited for this year. I mean, shout out to my boy, Jonathan Brooks. Obviously he'll be a number 1 running back at some point, but I just don't see how you can even put him in the top half with this team.
Receiver 1, Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I will say that out of all of this, I mean, I think maybe 1 or 2 of these rookies will go off. We haven't talked about mine yet, but I would have actually taken Rome Odunze over Xavier Worthy. Right or wrong, I think that he was just maybe the best wide receiver in the draft. He was incredible at Washington. I could see him hitting, but like you said, it's already a pretty crowded room. And I think he'll carve out a spot, but I think that'll even his success will be, I think, a little bit more longer term as, Caleb Williams is getting adjusted to the NFL and all that. So overall, just not high on Carl's team. Way too many rookies. But I think that we may look at this and who knows, maybe this is some new keeper strategy that we didn't think of. He may just have 2 baller keepers next year that end up being 2 first-round picks that really catapults him for next year. But I don't see it for this year.
Yeah, I can buy that. Yeah, you're convincing me to drag him down a little bit, but I don't know. I'm still holding out hope for Carl here. All right, now we're into the top 5. So number 5, I had a classic Callan draft, and I hate that I did this, but here we are again. So okay, first we'll talk about my picks. I think I either went one of 2 ways, and this is what I do every year, and that's why I never win. My picks are all extremely risk upside that never pan out, or so conservative that it ends up holding back the entire team. I just can't hit that balance of upside with enough floor. I mean, I guess my team usually does pretty well, but not enough upside to probably push me into a consistent number 1 type finishing team. So obviously you look at my 2, 3, 4, Adams, Andrews, Evans, like they're going to be fine, right? All these guys are going to be fine. They're going to deliver, but none of them are going to finish number one at their position. It's just not going to happen, right? They're all going to be like, if Adams or Evans finishes top 10, I would be thrilled, but maybe one of them will, maybe. Andrews is going to be like top 5, but probably not tight end 1. So that I think Bijan is as he's a number 1 pick. I think he went about where people expected him to go. But yeah, my 1 through 4 is kind of like whatever. It's fine. It's not going to lose me anything, but it's probably not going to, again, elevate me to like the best team. Then I have the high risk side of things. I'm just going to gloss over Stroud. I think he's going to deliver pretty much this value. I think he's going to be a 6th-round pick. I think he doesn't run enough to be like elite, but he's going to pass enough, and they're going to build that offense around him. He's going to be a 6th-round value. So it's probably just like Homer to keep him at his regular draft slot. Then I picked Montgomery and Mostert, who are I have something interesting to talk about with these guys. Let me hit the rest of it. The rest of these are high upside guys, and I know none of them are going to hit. That's basically what this comes down to. Chubb might not even play this year, although if I could get half a season of him, even at like 80%, that would be huge. Brian Thomas, rookie wide receiver, probably not going to do anything. Dobbs is like, whatever. He's going to be fine. He's going to have a couple games that you're not going to be able to predict, so you can't really start him. Josh Downs, he's like he's like the Michael Pittman, but worse. Like, even if he was number 1, you still have Anthony Richardson throwing to you. So, like, whatever. These are flex fill-ins on bye weeks, but really, who cares? Now, there's an interesting thread I'm going to tie between your team and my team here with Montgomery and Mostert. And that is, I looked this stat up. So, these two guys, I think, are technically listed as either starters or co-starters on their teams, with Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit and Devon Achane in Miami. These two guys on my team, Mostert and Montgomery, are the old slow dudes. They combined for 31 touchdowns last year. Achane and Gibbs, who are like objectively the more talented players, combined for only 18 touchdowns last year. And that's why these two dudes both finished like really well relative to their talent level, essentially. So one of us is going to be very happy this year, and one of us is going to be very sad with how those touchdowns are going to be divided up this season. And I guess I just went with like cross my fingers and hope for goal line carries. So there's probably going to be some regression. I don't think the disparity is going to be 2-1 or close to that in terms of those red zone touches between these two guys and the two dudes on your team. But I do think like I'm just hoping it's close enough to make these guys, like weekly startable players for me, right? And then let Bijan and my receivers kind of like carry and then hopefully Stroud just turns into like a consistent starter. So I'm number 5. I had myself number 5. I think it's going to be hard for me to be too bad, but I really don't see enough upside for now. I'll have to play some waivers, hopefully get 1 or 2 dudes early on, and see if I can pick the team up. So tell me why I'm wrong and why I'm like so fucking low on your list.
No, you hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly why you're right at number 6. Because like when we were driving over to Phoenix, like I remember us having this conversation where I was like, dude, you and I like are always drafting to like make the playoffs and be like pretty good. But like I don't feel like either of us really draft to win the league. You know what I mean? Where it's like we could completely fall on our face. But I think that example you brought up is absolutely perfect, because I mean, ignoring obviously the the ADP value between the two, and you couldn't have taken them where I took them. It's like if you look at between Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane, and then you look at your guys, it's like who's more likely to win the league, right?
Yeah.
One of those sets is going to get you like a nice consistent. You might eke into the playoffs, or be a low seed in the playoffs, and probably not win, because these aren't difference makers. It feels like you're playing like Moneyball with your fantasy roster here, instead of just being like Achane's efficiency is off the charts. It's very unproven, but like I'm taking a legit shot on this versus like even I think honestly your Chubb pick is like exactly what puts this like is exactly like the mindset that like puts it at number 6 for me, right? Where instead of being like I'm going to take a flyer on somebody that I think might be a keeper for the future, or is somebody that's like really high risk, maybe not pan out, but like I'm actually going to buy that lotto ticket, and instead you bought like a nice used Camry from like 2008. You know what I mean? Where it's like
Dude.
I'm going to get some value out of this pick, almost certainly. But that value isn't going to win you the league. That value isn't really going to separate you, right? Like even if he comes back to relatively full form, it's like it's you don't know how much of the season it's going to be, right? Nick Chubb is also getting older, you know what I mean? So it's just like instead of like investing in like some cool stock, you basically just bought a Camry because you're like, oh well, the value is going to keep it because historically Camry, it's just like yeah. So, I mean, I don't think your team is bad. I think there's definitely some scenarios where this could win the league, but when you look at it, it's just like, even the Mike Evans pick, it's like that dude, he's Mr. Consistent. And like, I get it, he's consistently undervalued. He was definitely like on my list of targets too, but it's not, you went with a lot of like, okay, give me some proven but diminishing value as opposed to actually taking some shots to try and win the league is my beef with your roster.
Yeah, I think you hit it. I'm so like baseball moneyball brained that like my mindset is usually just make it in the playoffs and anything can happen, right? And that's what I do almost every year. But that's not like the Athletics didn't win the World Series the year of the Moneyball. Like that's not that's not good enough. Like you have to have the upside if you want to seriously contend. Although you take on more risk. So, okay, yeah, I'll quit yapping about that one because next you're gonna love this. Next, I had your team, so you were number 4.
Oh.
I know it, right? What a jerk!
That's just disrespectful.
I know. I think it's because, like, obviously there's a bit of my bias built in here. I think our teams are very linked because of that funny running back thing where I picked the, I guess, technically backups, but maybe vultures on some of your points. So, like, if my team does as well as I hope, then it's going to, it's not going to be good for your team, unfortunately. But anyway, I think I'm factoring that in a little bit. But, like, you obviously get the nod over me because these guys, like, obviously have higher upside. Justin Jefferson. This was, I think, if Kirk was still there in Minnesota, I think that bumps up your team probably, like, 2. Like you might go up to number 2 or 3, but with Darnold being there, throwing him the ball, and with him coming off the ACL, like it's just enough where like he's still going to be elite. Talent-wise, he's still the best receiver in the NFL. But is he a lock as a top 5 receiver? Like probably, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes in the 6 to 10 range. And that's still great, especially for a fucking 3rd round pick. That's incredible. But it's enough to give me pause that like, does that, take away from your team just a little bit, just enough to, basically put him at number 4. Kyler, I think he's going to be okay. He really hasn't played a whole year in like 3 seasons since 2021. And even then he was just a QB 10. Which is, again, below average. He could be good, right? I did look up after he came back. So his stats last year were nothing great because he was coming off the ACL. But if you go look at his per-game rushing attempts, which is obviously where a lot of his value is, his rushing did not diminish at all, if that makes you feel good. Like, his rushing last year was just as good as early in his career when he was, QB 6, 310. So I do think that's a good sign for him that he's going to bounce back, but again, he's got to put it together for a whole season. So, yeah, I mean, solid team, decent receivers, like decent, tight end, great running backs. Like, this is a top 4 team to me. Like, this is a top 3rd in the league. So, good job, dude.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm pretty high on Kyler Murray this year just because it does feel like the Cardinals gave him enough time to kind of come back, get fully recovered. I really like the addition of Maserati Marv, to give some much needed help, because I think that when you look at his past seasons where his numbers weren't super great, it's like, dude, who did he even have to throw to? Like the Cardinals, it feels like they haven't been serious for a minute, honestly. I think that, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, pretty obvious first round pick there. A-Chain, I traded him to K-Man and K-Man didn't keep him. So I took him back just because, again, it's such a small sample size, but what he did in those 3 games last year was just absolutely bananas. And even if he can put together like 70% of that over a season, it's going to be a monster, right? Like it just feels like you could very easily look back and say, oh yeah, I won the league because of A-Chain. So
Yeah.
that's ultimately, I was looking at a lot of other dudes in that area, but that's really what sold it for me, right? It was just like I kind of said, all right, forget like the safest, forget like, what the quote unquote right answer is here. I was like, who could legitimately, win me the league? Justin Jefferson, I
yards
did
per carry. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like it's
carries.
insane.
Bananas.
And it's like, that like as long as Tyreek is there, like there's always going to be that heat that takes off like the run. You know what I mean? You always have to account for some really good receivers. And so it just feels like if they, with Waddle and Tyreek and A-Chain, it just feels like it's almost like a math problem you just can't solve. Like for the Miami offense, really the only limiting factor is Tua. It's like if you had a better quarterback, like this might be a different story. Justin Jefferson, I had to keep him at the 3rd round.
Of course.
Because it was just it is a bummer. I was very anti McCarthy. Coming into the season, he looked fine in preseason, but still, I mean, at the end of the day, I probably would rather have him throwing than Sam Darnold. But I'm just hoping, I'm at least trying to talk myself into this one because, yeah, I mean, it was a tough situation in that if it was just, drafting him like in the late first, early second, like whatever, like I wouldn't have done it, right? Like I would have passed on him for that situation. But I'm kind of stuck with him because of the value I could get out of the keeper situation. I'm pretty high on Devontae Smith. I liked getting that little secured spot there so that I knew during the draft that I could focus completely on drafting 2 running backs at the beginning, because then that locks up my next 2 receivers there. Ken Walker, I'm high on Ken Walker. I mean, like he's just produced. Like I love him. I think he's great. He's been extremely consistent, and I think he'll continue to do that. Already talked about Kyler Murray. I think he's going to improve significantly, like both with taking the time to come back from the injury, getting a little bit more help at the receiver position, and then from there, I definitely took some time to get a little bit wild. Obviously, Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell are both homer picks. I fully accept that. I think Xavier Worthy makes a ton of sense, right? Because at the end of the day, you really just need one deep shot touchdown for him to add value for that week, right? Like it's just that's the way the math worked out in my mind, where it's just like, he may only get a few targets a game as that deep threat, but damn, if you connect on 1 or even 2 in a game, that's elite. You know what I mean? You're going to get 10 plus points just from that. Adonai Mitchell, I think, is a honestly, in my opinion, a more well-rounded receiver. I know his stats weren't as good as Xavier Worthy's, but my favorite Adonai Mitchell stat is that he has had a touchdown, at least one touchdown catch in every college football playoff game he's been in, right? He's just that guy. And I think about some of the clutch moments of the season, like when we were about to blow the lead against TCU, he's the guy who made this like crazy catch on like 3rd and 15 or something like that. So I'm just high on both of those. Obviously, those are homer picks. Keon Coleman, I think, is actually super interesting. I think he has a lot of potential for sure. I liked what we saw at Florida State and at Michigan State beforehand. He's more of a flyer there, and then the rest are kind of just filler. Plus, Gabe Davis, I could see. Gabe Davis is like you just kind of plug it in, and maybe you'll get 20 points in a week, and maybe you'll get 2. Like it's just some nice depth there. So I think the top half of my team is pretty good. I think that when I look at the rookies, at least Xavier Worthy, I think, is a pretty safe bet to at least get the volume and the attention. Like they drafted him for a very specific reason, and I think he'll at least get that shot. So I think if any of these rookies end up being really baller, I think it's probably worthy just because of the situation that he's in. I mean, you literally have Patrick Mahomes throwing to you. And so, yeah, I mean, overall, pretty happy. I think fourth is all jokes aside, totally fair. But like I said, in this draft, I completely just drafted thinking I was like, I want to play to win, not play to just make the playoffs.
Yeah. Where'd you have yourself? What was your?
Oh, I had myself at number 2.
Okay. Yeah. You gotta be confident. Yeah. No, I agree.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you don't like your own draft, who's gonna like your draft? That's my point.
My mom, I called her and told her about it. She said, "Good job." Yeah.
She put it on the fridge.
Hell yeah. Next to my report card. All right. Top 3. Here they come. I had a definite 1 and 2, 1A, 1B. But first, number 3, Mr. Clabe. So he was my number 3. I think he has maybe the best 1-2. Well, not the best. Very, very high running back 1-2. Probably the best running back core. Breece Hall is going to be elite again. I'm not even worried about it. Kyron Williams, I think they're not going to deviate from what they did last year. So I will he be number 7? I don't know. I think he's going to be two top 10 running backs. One of them probably top 5. Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is going to be solid again. He got hurt a little bit last year, but as long as the Patriots don't totally deviate from the run, which I don't think that's even an option considering their quarterback situation, I think he's just gonna get enough carries on volume alone. I didn't realize. I think Joe Burrow is going to be good. Like I think he's going to bounce back. It's Joe Burrow. I didn't realize this when I was doing research. Evan Ingram finished as tight end 2 last year in our league. Tight end 2. I remember him being decent, but I did not remember him being a tight end 2. That's crazy. So I think that was a kind of a steal, to be honest. Down here in the 8th round, like that's kind of wild. I think Eckler's he's old, right? He's not the guy he used to be. I think he's gonna pop off in a few games, right? He's only 2 years removed from a running back 1 finish. He's gonna pop off enough games. He's gonna, eat enough in that offense that maybe you could do like the stereotypical rookie quarterback needs a check down target, and that's Austin Eckler. Like I could easily see him outperforming number 9 here. Just like a lot of dudes where I'm like, yeah, that's a solid pick. And I just said that about everybody. I don't think McLaurin's going to be anything. I don't like he hasn't been good, lucky to be a wide receiver 2 maybe based on his previous years. I think the thing that makes Caleb the number 3, like the clear number 3 and not really consideration for top 2 are again, these receivers. Debo's good. He's going to be fine. Like, again, he hasn't finished as a wide receiver 1 in a few years. DK is fine as a wide receiver 2. Again, nothing elite, but good enough. So the receivers, those tend to be a little more findable in free agency anyway. So it's not a lost cause, but this running back core is just so solid. A great tight end, Burrow as a court. Like this is just a really high end team. So good job at Clabe for drafting this way. What do you think of Clabe's team?
Did we look at the same roster here? Because I had this dude at like 12. I don't understand anything you just said. That is
you don't
insane.
like.
All right,
you don't. Dude, 2 top 10 running backs is a number 12. Joe Burrow, a number 2 tight end. I need to hear your reasoning for 12.
Okay, so can you pull up Breece Hall's stats as you call him an elite running back?
He's
this dude is just like a solid 10-piece a game guy. Like those are great. Don't get me wrong, but like that's the value that I want to get out of like Ken Walker. You know what I mean? Who's my 5th round pick, not my starting running back.
He had 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns. Like what running backs are you taking that are getting 1,600 yards of offense? There's one
with the number 4 pick. You best be getting Bijan.
He finished higher than Bijan last year. He was a number 2 running back.
And you're telling me, though, that going into this season, you believe more in Breece Hall on the Jets than you do on Bijan coming out of his rookie year? Like,
yeah, I do.
I just don't. I don't understand that.
The guy who's done it on an offense with, like, who was their quarterback last year? Like, was it Zach Wilson still? Or no, was it? Who was their quarterback last year? Whoever it was.
Dude, it was all over the place last year.
I know. And he was still able still able, almost 1,000 rushing yards, almost 600 receiving. Like, you don't accidentally finish wide receiver 2. That's like I'm a believer, I guess. I guess I'm standing for Breece Hall. Again, do I think he's going to finish number 2? No. Do I think he's going to finish top 10? Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I could see him finishing, top 10, top 15. I just don't like the pick when you're drafting 4th.
Okay.
I think the rest of when you look at the next picks, Deebo Samuel is, again, he did perform pretty well last year. That dude's getting old, right? Like I was on the Deebo train and 22, I think. So I definitely got a taste of that sweet, the 10 point a game kind of a thing. Yeah, that sweet Deebo. DK Metcalf, I feel like is pretty good, but there is his numbers last year. I'm just pulling this up. A solid, what is that, 8 points a week kind of a thing. It's just, I don't know. I will say it was probably a little bit harsh to put him at 12. I think this team does have a pretty good floor. But Scary Terry, maybe I'm just bitter from last year because when I got him, he was not.
I think he's not.
Definitely,
yeah,
was not the best.
No,
Kyron Williams is an interesting. I mean, I like the keeper value there for sure. Joe Burrow has obviously dealt with some health issues. I think he's good, but he's also in that tier of he's not a running quarterback, so I'm not going to put too much stock in him, right? If you're not getting rushing tutties out of him. Evan Ingram being the number, I need to verify that. Number 2 in our league, that is.
It's right here. I'm looking at it. Number 2 on Sleeper.
Hang on.
He was number 5.
That's wild.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. I remember him being decent, but I don't remember him finishing number 2. And that's 2 years in a row of a top 5 finish. Yeah, the Jags suck, but this is fantasy. It doesn't matter what the team
did tight ends just suck all last year? Because I'm looking at his week numbers for 2023, and it's that's a cool stat, but his numbers weren't that great there.
I mean, it's good enough for number 2. Yeah.
I think after, and then of course, everybody else's roster, after about the 7th round, it's just it's a bunch of Jags, Yeah. Eckler, who knows what we'll get out of him. Cortland Sutton, still a obvious homer pick. The Wan'Dale Robinson goat, of course. That was maybe the best pick of the draft, but I don't know. If you're not high on Breece Hall, I think that it really, really changes the shape of this team. The other thing I'd say too is how much of his value came from the disaster of the Jets quarterback situation last year, right? What was his name? That running back for the Jags, who had one monster year when they were having all sorts of quarterback issues.
Oh,
it was before Etienne.
Yeah. Oh, what was his name? Josh.
I can't even remember.
Because he only had one good year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm wondering is that what Breece Hall had last year, right? Where it's just well, I mean, we got to technically play a game. We don't have a quarterback, so we may just rush it off. I don't know. I just didn't understand that compared to somebody like Bijan Ceiling at the 4th overall spot. Like I said, probably a bit unfair to look at this and be this is a trash team because I think it has a higher floor than some teams. But man, I don't know. I'll give you Kyron Williams, but that's about it. Ramondre Stevenson, I didn't even get into him. Fuck any Patriots running back. I'll go on record and say that. I'm not touching any of that.
Top 10 2 years ago. He's going to be basically his RB3, right? This is a solid flex play in my opinion as a running back 3 on your roster. That's I haven't broken it down. There might be a couple Tron's team. Anyway, I'm not going to do all that right now, but I doubt there's many teams that have an RB3 better than Ramondre Stevenson is what I'll say. And it was James Robinson. That's who we couldn't remember.
James Robinson. That's who I was thinking of.
And he didn't do shit after that year.
Yeah, exactly. That was, so anyways, I could be wrong on Breece Hall. I don't feel quite as strong as an opinion as I do on Anthony Richardson being terrible, but I still feel pretty confident that we're going to look back and that Breece Hall pick is not going to make a lot of sense.
Dude, fucking pin it. Pin the message.
Pin it.
All right, the last two. These are my 1A, 1B. There's obviously two dudes left. My number 2, I had Tarv. So, there was a similarity with these top two guys. Probably the 1-2 best receiver cores in the league. I think Carl's Lamb Chase combo is like the best there, but I think as a whole, like this is just stupidly deep to me. AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Amari Cooper, Garrett Wilson, Tank Dell. Like Garrett Wilson is better than maybe some teams' wide receiver 1s, and he's wide receiver 4 on this team, depending on what you think about Aaron Rodgers. I think Shakir is a great flyer. Jalen Hurts, I think, is going to do Jalen Hurts shit again. Kamara is going to be Kamara. He's going to be probably regress a little bit as he ages, yada, yada. But, I mean, he's still, borderline running back 1. The big downside, why I named him 1B, Travis, was the lack of a real RB2, and the tight end doesn't really do anything for me. This receiving core is just so good that it's going to be hard for him to have really down weeks. I think he's going to be very consistent between Hurts's running, Kamara, and these receivers that, like, if he scores less than 90, I'll be shocked, right, on any given week. He's not going to win every week, of course, but, like, there's just too many points here to have a really down week, I think. He's got to fill in one of these guys has to come in as a running back 2. And, I mean, somebody could do it, probably not doubt. Maybe Spears delivers enough. We'll see. And then Freiermuth, this guy is going to be worthless.
Yep.
Yeah, not only is he on a bad offense, he's on an Arthur Smith offense. I think I looked this up yesterday. The Broncos, so this is for Russ, the Broncos had, I think, like 3 or 4 touchdowns all year to all their tight ends. Russ was not throwing to tight ends last year in Denver. And then Arthur Smith and his tight end management, obviously like infamous now from what he did in Atlanta. Freiermuth is going to be an early drop, I think, within the first few weeks of the season just because they're not going to use him. I think he's a good tight end. Like, I think he's talented, but I don't believe in Russ or Arthur Smith's ability to get the ball to a tight end. So this guy's going to be gone, and then missing tight end or running back 2, I think, is what knocked this down to a second place for me. But this receiving core is just like deadly. Travis
I agree with that.
Number 2 roster.
So I had him at 5, and the obvious reason is, like the running back depth definitely concerns me a lot. I think he makes up for it a lot with his super good wide receiver core. The reason why I actually knocked it down further, though, is my personal opinion is that, just like we talked about with Lamar, I think Jalen Hurts' rushing is going to be impacted by Saquon.
Yeah, I can see it.
I just don't think they're going to do that again. And if you look at his numbers, without all the tush pushes, it's a lot different, right? And I think that if Jalen Hurts does take a step back fantasy-wise, I mean, I think he'll be a good quarterback like he is in real life. But if he takes a step back fantasy-wise and you're missing out on those rushing touchdowns plus whatever rushing touchdowns you're missing out on from not having, an RB2 plus, I think that's why I had to knock his team down a bit. But he does have a really solid roster overall with, I think, a really high ceiling. Like, I think he could very well win the league again if those receivers perform like we think, and if I'm completely wrong about Jalen Hurts and that his rushing touchdowns continue.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge for Travis, and then of course Andrew with Saquon in the first. So, what did you have Travis at on your ranking?
I had him at 5.
Okay, yeah, a little lower than I do, but that's fair, especially if you think a lot of Hurts' value is going to maybe get siphoned away.
Is going to disappear, yeah. And like I said, I fully admit that in my case, like if you have like a bad running back room, like I know that I personally overvalue the position.
Yeah. All right, last one here, Mr. Mrak. I mean, all the wide receiver stuff I just said about Travis, the only team that's better was Mark's team on like a 1-to-1, 2-to-2 type situation. Tyreek is probably going to finish wide receiver 1 again, or he hasn't for a while, but he's going to finish 1 or 2. Just depends on how the touchdowns fall, but he's going to be Tyreek. DJ Moore, I guess the only knock is, the more crowded room, wide receiver room there. And then a rookie quarterback is just kind of dangerous to me. But I think he's going to be good enough, and I think Caleb's going to be fine. Maybe. It doesn't matter. But then he has Olave and St. Brown here. Like, this is, again, I don't know how you finish with less than 90 points a week. I think Mixon is going to be great. I think he's going to deliver, back of second end value. Like, he has a solid RB1. Another tight end that shocked me a little bit was Njoku. I thought he was a little bit better last year. Tight end 6. Like, not bad. Like, good enough where you're not going to have to probably worry about streaming. And that's surprisingly huge on a week-to-week basis in terms of, like, juggling bench spots and carrying multiple tight ends. And, like, he's going to be good enough to avoid that. So I thought that was solid. Dobbins, if he comes back, he's elite. If he can recover, I think the couple things that I had knocks on Mark's team was, I'm not saying Caleb Williams is going to be a bad quarterback. We just don't know yet. But I think taking him as a rookie in a 7th round pick is a little bit crazy. I think there was a little bit of homerism maybe there, which is fine. But so that was like a slight knock, and I actually considered knocking him down below Travis. But then the actual who actually might end up starting for this team, Jordan Love was a top 5 quarterback last year. Like, this is such a safe number, top 5 pick at the position way late in the draft. Like, this is, 0 QB or whatever, late round QB at its finest. So I'm really not worried. Either Caleb's going to hit and this is going to look genius, or he's going to be a dud, whatever, and you have last year's number 5 quarterback. Like, I think this ended up like me keeping Mark at number 1. I think with that in mind, the only flaw is the running back 2, because I do not believe in Tony Pollard at all. Dobbins is still coming back from injury. I don't think he's even listed as the starter. Gus Edwards is. Chuba is probably not going to do anything, just like there is no running back 2 on this list. He's going to have to find somebody, like an injury fill-in in the first few weeks of the season. That's the only minor ding I had on him, was no RB2 and this quarterback kind of shuffle here early on in the season. But otherwise, RB1, best wide receiver core, solid, good enough tight end, startable quarterback. Like, yeah, he starts off with the most to lose, I think, this year. So GG's to Mark. Did you agree with that, or did you have him somewhere else?
Yeah, no, I 100% had him at number 1. And I had almost the exact same thoughts that you did too, where like, and it's kind of the perfect count. Like, Joe Mixon is exactly what I think of like Breece Hall, where it's like, hey, cool, you got me like 10 points. That's great. Like, you're doing exactly what I expected of you. Obviously the difference there is, a whole round. The missing RB2 is pretty, it's a little bit worrisome. I think that there is like a little bit of magic where the backup Cowboys running back seems to just have some mystical powers, and I just don't know that Tony Pollard, like when he didn't have that magical aura, is a desirable RB2. So I'm with you. I think that's missing. There's a crazy high ceiling on some of these players, like Hollywood Brown, J.K. Dobbins. Both kind of injury prone at this point, you know what I mean? Where it's like, if this is finally the season where they stay healthy, like that's pretty terrifying. David Njoku was like on every fantasy expert's like, get this for value out of the tight end. So I think that made a ton of sense. I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly as far as the Caleb Williams pick would have looked really silly if he also didn't have Jordan Love just as a backup plan in case that doesn't pan out, because he was a guy that was very, very undervalued in this draft. And if somebody had taken Kyler Murray before me, that's who I was going to target. And I think you just look at it, his keeper value was just the best, which generally speaking means you're going to have the best draft. Being able to keep Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Chris Olave. It's just like you are already starting on third base here, and Mark just did a good job of not messing that up. I think he also has enough wide receiver depth too, where he could reasonably trade for an RB2, and if he did that, I think that would really make this a complete team.
That is interesting. You called out. I think Hollywood Brown is one of these dudes. It's like he was so talented in college. He hasn't really made that happen. Granted, he was at Baltimore where they aren't really pass heavy. Couldn't really make it work in Arizona either. Maybe with Patty Mahomes, this like he finally does what we think he can do talent wise. My thinking though with this is Mahomes is not throwing deep. Maybe that was his personnel, but maybe that's just like I don't want to question the GOAT. He's winning games. Who cares? But outside of Kelsey and Tyreek Hill, I want to know, I could look this up right now, which receiver has he really elevated to like superstar status? Like he's done the Tom Brady, I'm going to win with whoever you throw on the field, but none of those guys are like, considered, I guess he threw to Randy Moss technically, but he did not make Randy Moss. He did turn Edelman into like a Hall of Very Good player, but it wasn't like Tom Brady made a career out of turning talented dudes into elite guys. He turned average dudes into good enough guys, right, to win championships. If Mahomes does that, even with someone like Hollywood Brown or one of these other guys, right, Xavier Worthy, Sky Moore, whatever, like I just have questions about all these receivers that like Mahomes is going to turn them into something more than just good enough to win games, right? Like Mahomes is going to do that. Hollywood's going to have a good season. Is it going to be good enough that he could flip either him or one of these other receivers for an RB2? It's possible, but we'll see how it goes. But I think that's a good point. I mean, he's just so deep that he really just needs one of these dudes to hit, right? Dobbins, Hollywood, even Huber down here, Chuba. Like, yeah, if he can get one of those guys to hit, he's already sitting in first. It could just put him over the top. So, all right.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think with the Hollywood Brown thing too, just to kind of close this out, like I don't think it's like Mahomes is making any of these guys. When you look at Tyreek and Travis Kelce, they both already are bringing elite skill sets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that synergy there. I mean, I do think there is a little bit of viewing Hollywood through like college tinted glasses, and obviously now there's really competition for that deep threat spot when you've got like the fastest person in NFL history that's also trying to take the top off the defense. But yeah, I mean, Mark, just trade for an RB2 and you'll probably go for a 3-peat.
Yeah. So yeah, you said you had him at number 1 also, right? On your rankings.
Yeah, without question. Again, like I said, I think with this one, it came down to the keeper value. Like it's really, I don't know, that would actually be interesting to look at in terms of like just our draft rankings, but it's very hard to have a bad draft when you have excellent keepers versus ADP.
Tell that to K-Man, it's rough.
I got to go back a few weeks and tell him before he didn't set his keeper.
For real. All right, I think that's a wrap for Fantasy Draft Recap 2024. We'll get it posted and start getting flamed by everybody how bad our takes were.
Brees Hall sucks.